Hi. This is our first Books Love Everyone book group wrap-up video. So in the month of January, across 3 different platforms, about 22, I believe, at last count, 22 that I'm aware of, people read these 2 books with me. 13 people read them together, and everybody else just kind of read them individually and contacted me in different ways. So we've got Jane Eyre, which we all know is my favorite book of all time, and Praying with Jane Eyre, which I got a lot out of this read. I definitely have criticism of it. I didn't hate it. I actually liked it more on a second read than I liked it on the first read. But most individuals that I heard from about this book really didn't like it. One good friend of mine who's reading kind of on her own, she's halfway through the book, and may join us in the Fable app at some point, but she really liked it, but she wasn't part of any conversations about the book. So I didn't hear any of that or feel any of that support for the story or for the book until after we had had our Zoom conversation. For the Zoom conversation, 2 friends showed up. It was great. Both of whom I know mainly through YouTube, through BookTube. One has her own book channel, Beth's Bookish Reviews. So you should check out her channel. I'll link her down below. And she was great because she brought up the point that everybody feels, don't tell me you don't feel it, everybody feels this like love for Edward Rochester. I know he gets such a bad rap. We talked about that bad rap. I'll share a little bit of that here. But first, I just want to say a couple of like logistical things. The Zoom works. The Zoom was great. I met with 2 wonderful people who had been interacting on the Fable app and also through BookTube, and they sent me their email and they got into the Zoom, no problem. We will continue with Zoom for the rest of the year. Come as you are. It was a good time. That being said, I also think I really liked having the very small group. So come as you are, but also don't come in droves. I don't think we'll ever get to the drove part, but I'm not that prideful to think that would happen. Zoom works, and we're going to stick with Zoom. Fable is not working. We're going to stick with Fable for the month of February, and then we're going to scooch over to something else. Fable is just a little bit clunky. It's hard to keep track of things. It's unreliable with how it releases. At least for me, it was unreliable with how it released notifications about comments. Within the app itself, I mean, I don't have push notifications happening on my phone for the Fable app itself, but within the app itself, there is a little bell that should light up whenever there's new activity in the book group. And it would wait until I had like 5 to 8 interactions, which could be the course of a week or 2, before it would tell me that anything was happening. So it was just really unreliable. And I have to say again that I'm not in any way sponsored by Fable. It's just something we were trying out to see if it would work for us. And it's really not. It also doesn't allow us to have 2 reads for the book group at the same time, which I think is really kind of silly because a lot of book groups have more than one book going on at the same time. And it doesn't have, I like the way that it breaks everything down chapter by chapter to save you from spoilers, but at the same time, it's not a very interactive, like conversation generating model. So 1 more month with Fable, and then we're going to move into something else. A couple of people have suggested Voxer, something I haven't really heard about or thought about ever. And then in the last couple of weeks, I had one person suggest it in relation to maybe making more of a conversation or a buddy read for the things they carried, which I'm also doing a series about this year. And 2 other people mentioned it in relation to book group, Voxer. So possibly Voxer. I've never used it. I now have it on my phone. I've now downloaded it on my phone and I've looked at it and it just looks like a messaging app. And so it'll be like a scrolling conversation with 13 to 22 people. I think that's a little overwhelming, but probably manageable. It'll be really hard to save us from spoilers and things like that. Like, people will really have to take responsibility for that. Although there is a lot of research that says the spoilers actually help with your understanding of what you're reading, but I'm not gonna go there. I know people feel very strongly about spoilers. Yeah, so we're not gonna stick with Fable. One more month with Fable. So if you are reading The Love Letters by Madeleine L'Engle or Letters of a Portuguese Nun by something Sear, I don't remember her first name, then go ahead and jump onto Fable and join us, and then we'll move away from Fable, either into Voxer or into Discord. I use Discord for Book Mama's book group, and I have used Discord for some things that Katie at Books and Things has done. And I actually used Discord for my own Mary Shelley May readathon, or not readathon, reading month, reading initiative, we'll say, like Olive calls Nonfiction November her reading initiative. Mary Shelley May is my reading initiative, and I've used Discord for that. I don't really like Discord. I personally don't like Discord, but it may be our best option. So we'll see. If you have feelings, put them in the comments below so that I will know what your feelings are. And if you're not a commenter on YouTube, but you are also following me on Instagram, go ahead and shoot me a direct message about it too, or instead, so that I can kind of get a gauge on what people would prefer, Voxer or Discord. Now, all right, things that came up. For the most part, I think almost everybody read both books. The majority of people read both our nonfiction and our fiction read of January. Most people who chose to read Jane Eyre already loved Jane Eyre. We did have somebody read it for the first time, and I didn't get their feedback on it. And we had somebody read it for the second time who had just read it for the first time at the end of last year, and got her feedback, and she loves it. She loves it. She said that the first time she read Jane Eyre, she really read it through a lens and an expectation that we have today for Rochester, the way that he takes responsibility for his people, the way that he moves through the world, the way Jane Eyre is treated. She really read through a 21st century lens. And the second time she read, and it made her very frustrated, obviously. And the second time she read it, she was able to read it through the time period in which it comes from and kind of see really just how open-minded in reality Rochester is. Another person who was in our discussion, I've already outed her, Beth, was saying how much she loves Rochester. She's read this book many times, like myself, and she loves Rochester. I talked about how when I was 16 years old, one of my favorite scenes in all of literature, one of the most romantic things I could imagine in all of life, was the way that Rochester pretends to be the fortune teller woman. And now I read it and just think, well, I would slap him. Just talk to her directly. But as a 16-year-old, I thought, oh, how romantic. So that's one example of how coming back to a book can really change the way that you see yourself, or the way you realize you see yourself. It can really change the way you see the world. It can really change the way you see the book itself. You are a different person. That was very loud. You are a different person when you read a book for a third, fourth, fifth, sixth time, because life has made you different. Your lenses are different. Your understanding of the world is different. Your experience has been altered, changed, and expanded, hopefully. Sometimes it shrinks, but expanded. And so the way that you see a character in a book, or the things that they do, the way that you experience that book is going to be different too, usually in such a beautiful way. It's why I think sometimes we're afraid to go back and reread if we really loved something, because what if we don't love it anymore? It's okay. It's okay to let those things go. It's okay to let it go. You might find you love it in a different way. And that's what I find with Jane Eyre every time I reread it. I read this last year in January and really focused on the childhood portion of Jane Eyre. And this time when I read it, I really focused on the in the wilderness portion of Jane Eyre, where she's with her cousins, where she's with St. John and she's making these decisions and she's kind of growing into the woman she thinks that she should be. And I asked our Zoom callers why it is that St. John gets the last words. Why is it? I'm going to read them for you. I don't actually think that reading them ruins the end of the book at all. It says, St. John, or St. John, is unmarried. He never will marry now. Himself has hitherto sufficed to the toil, and the toil draws near its close. His glorious sun hastens to its setting. The last letter I received from him drew from my eyes human tears, and yet filled my heart with divine joy. He anticipated his sure reward, his incorruptible crown. I know that a stranger's hand will write to me next to say that the good and faithful servant has been called at length into the joy of his Lord. And why weep for this? No fear of death will darken St. John's last hour. His mind will be unclouded, his heart will be undaunted, his hope will be sure, his faith steadfast. His own words are a pledge of this. My master, he says, has forewarned me. Daily he announces more distinctly, surely I come quickly, and hourly I more eagerly respond. Amen. Even so, come, Lord Jesus. Why is that the end of the book? I often forget that that's the end of the book. Most of us do. Most people walk through this lifetime believing that Reader, I Married Him is the end of the book. And 50% of the people who feel like that's the end of the book have a problem with that being the end of the book. Here we have St. John. Give me your thoughts. I know Vanessa Zoltan's thoughts on this. I have kind of an idea of why it ends there, but I don't like it. So I really want to know. And we were inconclusive. We were inconclusive in our understanding. One member was saying, well, the words are from the book of Revelation, and it's like an ending. And yeah, it's an ending. Why is that the ending of the book? But I really focused in my own read this time, without meaning to, like it just happened. I really focused on those characters in that portion of Jane's story that kind of caught in the middle. Like she's not where she wants to be. She is where she is. She is where she wants to be, but where she wants to be is not where she wants to be. She has left a situation which would have made her extremely happy, except that it proved to be an illusion. Part of it was very real. The love that they felt for each other was very real, but the ability of Rochester to actually give her that love was an illusion because he had other priorities, other responsibilities, other engagements, which he was trying so hard to imagine were not there or would not get in the way of him and his happiness. And he struggles to the very end, to the wedding day. He struggles with whether or not he's allowed to have this happiness. He's going to have to steal it, and he's not allowed to. In the end, he's not allowed to. Although, huge change in the form of fire and death and destruction, basically the falling down, the crumbling of an entire life, kind of against his will, enable him to actually be available to have what he wants, except that what he wants has fled from the illusion that he created in the first place. And she doesn't want to be where she is, but she wants to be exactly where she is, because exactly where she is a much more honorable place. And the kind of happiness that will come to her through being a person of integrity is greater than the kind of happiness that would come to her being in a stolen moment. So she is where she wants to be, but she doesn't want to be where she wants to be. And she's giving it her all. She is genuinely giving it her all, to the point where she actually considers marrying someone for duty and service as opposed to for love. And this girl has always been this free bird. No net ensnares her. And she is about to Well, she is considering allowing herself to be in a loveless marriage with a man she respects, but in a loveless marriage, just so she can serve him and serve God and lose herself completely in that. But she's kind of thinking, well, thinking about myself hasn't really gotten me anywhere that I want to be. So I might as well go a different direction. And I've never really thought of Jane and that she becomes a teacher for a little bit. She just has these female friendships. She kind of learns more about who she really is. She gets relief and she is freed from financial worry, and from like feeling duty bound to these people. She is in some ways more free than she has ever been, and she almost ensnares herself into a marriage because maybe it's what she should do as opposed to what she wants to do. And in refusing him, he becomes very angry because in a lot of ways, he is also entrapped by the expectations of society and of his religion. We don't think about the entrapments that men had to face too, right? So because he is not independently wealthy, and because he wants to be a missionary, and because he wants to serve God overseas, he has all of these things that are on him. And one of those things is he can only do this successfully, he thinks, if he has a wife, so that he can move in circles where there are women present, etc., etc. And so he feels like she is his freedom, like by agreeing to become his wife, she will be his freedom of movement, his freedom of interaction. And when she refuses, it's a little bit like he's ensnared, but she's freed. She does consider it though. She does seriously consider it. And that's when she gets the call from across, the universe. We actually talked about this in the Zoom call. We talked about how it's a fairly realistic book. It's a pretty dark book. And as you're reading it, you really have no idea how it's going to come together for Jane. You have absolutely no idea how it's going to come together. And the way that it's brought together is magic. It's brought together by something otherworldly. And if you know anything about Charlotte Bronte and her childhood and her upbringing and where she grew up and the kinds of things her sisters wrote and the kinds of stories that they read and the fairy tales that were told to them by the people they surrounded them, you won't be surprised by the use of magic. But if you're reading it and you have never encountered it before in Charlotte Bronte's life, it feels a little bit out of context within the context of this book, except that if you remember, Jane really believes in ghosts, to the point where she has a little nervous breakdown as a child in the Red Room, right? There is established for us this sense that there is something beyond us. There's something beyond our understanding, beyond our knowledge. And so when she hears Rochester's voice call to her, his disembodied voice from a day, 2 days, 3 days travel away, call her. She drops everything and goes. She's certain she knows what she heard. She's certain she knows it was real, and she acts on it, which kind of makes you think that in the Red Room, she wasn't just a scared child. There truly was a ghost there. It really was a haunting, which makes me think about St. John's death. We start with a girl who gets in trouble, locked in a room with ghosts, with a man who has regrets. It's maybe a bookend because you have this man who dies without regret at the end, unhaunted. You've got a man who's haunted and you've got a man who's not haunted. Both of them were considered, in Jane's eyes, basically good men, neither of them perfect men. One haunted, the other not. One comes back to haunt, the other does not. And Rochester is a man who's somewhere in the middle. He's neither. And he is a ghost in life. He's both physical and real. He's a ghost. And he's gonna, life made him make the changes he needed to make, so and he embraced them. So he's going to be okay in life. He's going to die without regret, maybe not without regret. He's going to die having served his penance in life. It's interesting. It's interesting. I don't have a fully formed thought, but there's an idea. I really want to know why Charlotte ended it this way. I really want to ask her. I really want to say, yo, Charlotte, why did you give St. John the last word? I do think, though, she's very into patterns, and I do think there's something to this idea. I have to think through it more, though. Then we have, so this was a success. This was a success. First read, a success. Always great to start the year with Jane Eyre. And then we had Praying with Jane Eyre by Vanessa Zoltan. And this, some things that were said about this across the board were they wanted more from Vanessa Zoltan about the process of reading any text as if it's sacred. And I will say this, if you want to pick this up and get it from your library or something, there's great, that might be the place where you want to go, because that's where she kind of really goes into the different kinds of ways through history that people have read things in a sacred manner. And then she kind of gives you really little, like, not personal glimpses based on literature as how she's applied those types of readings. So that may be where you want to go. Universally, what I heard from readers this month was that they, or in the month of January, was that they really wished that there was more of this practicality as opposed to what you get for the bulk of this book, which is individual, what she refers to as sermons, based on different texts like Harry Potter, The Great Gatsby, mainly Jane Eyre, and how she uses those texts to interpret her own life and learn lessons in her own life. Some criticisms are her tone. She is an atheist, and she's an atheist in the way that she really doesn't believe in anything. And she's very open about that. I think at one point she talks about how silence is the thing that's bigger than her. So she's really centered, and she's really defined her life by the pain of her ancestors. She is from a Jewish family. She does not have a Jewish faith, but she does follow and gain value from ritual. And so she does do Jewish ritual quite a lot in order to feel closer to her family. As she's talking about her family's experiences, though, it sometimes feels like she maybe doesn't have enough personal experience with pain. And I don't know her life. I'm hesitant to say this, but it feels sometimes like she's capitalizing on the pain of her previous generations in order to be able to create a powerful message that matches the power of the text that she's using. And people commented on that. Across the board, people commented on that. The memoir aspect was both overwhelming and underwhelming at the same time. Some people commented, me included, and I will say it the way that I said it, but other people said it differently, but with the same intent, is that we approach the sacred differently than she does. My point was that when I feel something is sacred, there's an element of worship to that. And not that I want to worship books, but the gift of storytelling is amazing and is truly a gift that does not come from us. And I do kind of think that that is an amazing gift, and I worship the giver of that gift. She does not worship anything at all. And so there is kind of an emotional lack in the book. It is very focused on grief and very focused on pain, and interprets Jane Eyre in that way. It interprets Jane Eyre in a way that infuses it with power, but also focuses on grief and loss. It's the lens through which she views the world. She views the world through pain and grief and loss. And I do genuinely feel like there is so much wisdom in this book, in Praying with Jane Eyre. And I do think that at times she turns a phrase in a way that only she can do. And at the same time, I also understand what people are saying about how difficult it was to read. Some people mentioned, you know, that it was a visceral response to her. That they read a lot of memoir, but still there was something about her that was off-putting. Yeah, so there we go. There's our wrap up of our Zoom conversation and all the conversations that I kind of had with people across the board with reading Jane Eyre. We also talked, there was a lot of people who talked off and on with me about Miss Temple and Helen Burns. They got a lot of talk too. Everybody is always intrigued by Helen Burns, and I am always intrigued by Miss Temple. As a teacher, I am always intrigued by Miss Temple and how she does what she has to do. When she orders cheese and bread for them on the day when all the food is gross and burnt and rotten, and she orders cheese and bread for them knowing that it will come from her own pocket, like, that's a teacher power move right there. That's a teacher power move. I love it. I love it. And I've always thought of Miss Temple as like one of the core teachers that make up my understanding of the identity of teacherness. That's all I got to say about these books and our conversations over the course of the month. If you are reading with us in February, do please consider joining the Zoom. I think it was genuinely wonderful and not scary at all. And keep abreast of the postings I do here and on Bookstagram about a potential move to either Voxer or Discord for the month of March and onward. We won't make another move, so I want to make it carefully. But Fable just is not. It's not where it's at, unfortunately. Sorry, Fable makers. Sorry, Fable lovers. It just is not working for our book group. So we'll find something that does. In the meantime, let's go read.